Hi, everyone, and welcome to Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill for the WVHuddle.com Prep Football Podcast. We've got a new sponsor starting this week, and as you can see from our surroundings, if you're watching this, we've got a new location. We're at Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill, like I mentioned, 218 in the heart of downtown Charleston. I am Tom Bragg from the Charleston Gazette-Mail, joined as always by Gazette-Mail Assistant Sports Editor Derek Taylor and Gazette-Mail Prep Sports Reporter Ryan Pritt. Derek, you've been around since we started this 2 years ago, and I never imagined we'd actually have a place to do it. We've literally recorded episodes in my grandparents' basement once upon a time, and I think you recorded yours from bedroom. So it's just it's cool to see where we're at now with all of this.
It started off kind of as a whimsical thing we tried out. We were just talking to each other on Skype from our respective homes, and now here we are at Adelphia. So we've definitely grown some in the last couple of years. I'm happy to be here.
Okay. Ryan, this is only your second episode, I know, but I mean,
say you bring me in 1 week and here the next week.
Good thing.
That's something.
Good things happen.
No,
so.
When we worked at separate buildings and places, I admired what you guys did from afar, and it's glad you brought me into the fold here. It's fun. It's
Awesome. Glad to have everybody here, and glad to be at Adelphia again, 218 Capitol Street in downtown Charleston. We'll start things off this week with a segment we're going to call First Down. Take a look back at what happened in the world of West Virginia prep football last Friday, and it was quite a night last Friday. So you had in AAA, just locally, defending AAA state champion, and then number one, Capital, goes down to Cabell Midland at home, and then number two in AAA, the team that lost to Capital in the title game last year, South Charleston, goes down to Spring Valley and loses. You know, it's been a while since both of those teams have lost on the same night. Derek, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Ryan. But what do you really make of this? Is this an aberration week, or are there some pretty big red flags popping up for these teams?
I don't know that there's really big red flags. I think it is indicative of the fact that Capital lost a couple very pivotal people up front, and going against Midland, whose whole tradition in football is being good up front.
Yeah.
So Midland is. I think it says more about where Midland is this year than about a red flag for Capital. I do think that Capital has come back to the pack a little bit with the loss of Kayshawn Haley. And I think they do have a lot still to prove yet, of going forward without him. As far as South Charleston and Spring Valley, obviously that was the first game South Charleston had without Fred Crozier since he was lost for the season in the Capital game.
That's a broken foot, correct?
Yeah, exactly. His broken left foot, as a matter of fact. And a matchup between South Charleston and Spring Valley is always going to give South Charleston some problems because of Spring Valley's again, very much like Cabell Midland, big up front and well-disciplined. And that's going to cause a lot of South Charleston teams problems. It obviously did last week. So I don't know, like you said, red flag or aberration. I don't know that it's either, and at the same time it's kind of both. I think both teams are closer to the pack than they were last year.
Yeah. Ryan, what do you think about those two big, I don't want to say stunning losses, because Cabell Midland's a really good team, and Spring Valley, they're not going to every year be a team that's like, they might challenge for the title, but you see, they beat South Charleston, you're not stunned at that, I don't think. But what are your thoughts on what happened in AAA last week?
Kind of like you said, losing to Cabell Midland is not an embarrassing thing at all. To me, what's really important here is how Capital responds. They haven't had to respond to adversity in a while down there. I know they're on the road at Parkersburg this week, which, on paper, it looks like Capital should roll in that game, but going up to Parkersburg, you never know,
Yeah.
And for South Charleston, it's a little bit more alarming simply because it's a second loss. And now you're inching down toward 3 and 4 range. And I think they had 3 last year, correct? They still made the state finals. So they can get it turned around in a hurry there, and obviously a home date with Nitro should help that.
As it tends to do.
Yeah, so, I think both teams I think they have plenty of room to respond here, and they'll probably get it back on the right track in the coming weeks.
Another game, local interest in the Kanawha Valley to us, I want to get your guys' thoughts on. George Washington beat St. Albans 87-8 on Friday night. We kind of knew GW was going to be better than they've been the last few years. And Derek, you and I talked about this. They really kind of made you stand up and take notice when they just put one on Huntington at the in the preseason at the MSAC Grittorama. And they haven't really done anything to lessen that position. In fact, they've strengthened it each week, I thought. And 87-8 against St. Albans, I mean, we talked a little bit, I believe, in the first week's podcast about how it's not really a platoon system at quarterback, and it's looking more and more like maybe it is kind of a platoon system at quarterback for GW, but it seems whatever the Patriots are doing, it's been working. Ryan, we'll start with you on this. Just how good is this GW team, or Is this a team that, we're going to be talking about around, say, Thanksgiving weekend, or is it going to be one of the GW teams that sort of flames out?
I think it is. They're a playoff team at least, I think. To me, I'm looking forward to them kind of playing a yardstick game. We know they lost by 1 point at Paul Blazer, but what do we really
That's a good
know
Paul
about
Blazer
Paul
team.
Blazer
Yeah,
team?
they're good.
So I think the jury's still out a little bit. You mentioned the platoon quarterback thing. Nunu Miller's still there.
Yeah.
And that kid can tote the ball. So, I think the jury's still out a little bit on GW, but we're going to find out in the next few weeks, I think.
Derek, thoughts on GW?
Ryan made a great point in that I think it's a lot easier to have this kind of situation at quarterback when you do have a Nunu Miller there and to take the bulk of the pressure for the offense off that quarterback. I think what we're looking at GW probably being at 4-1, let's say, at midway through the season, and they still have games against South Charleston. They still got to play Capital. I think they still have Midland and Hurricane on that as well. So they might pick up a couple losses in the second half of the season, but I do think that this is a playoff team. I don't know that they're a top 8, a host a playoff game kind of thing, but I think they're back in the postseason. I think they're well on their way to that.
Yeah.
Just spitballing here, guys, but say GW is in that bottom half of the playoff bracket. South Charleston has 2-3 losses. Might see that GW South Charleston game in the playoffs again this year.
You could see that, yeah. We actually had a situation like that, gosh, it was 5 or 6 years ago, but GW and Capital played on the final game of the regular season, and I think they played each other the next week in the first round. Capital and Riverside had that situation in 2007, so it wouldn't be the first time.
Yeah. Looking around the state, we'll wrap up this first segment. Sure. Derek, we'll start with you. Any other games that popped out at you worth mentioning here from last week?
Well, I think obviously the Point Pleasant Wayne game last week, that blowout, and Ryan was there to cover it, and I'll let him kind of touch on that if he wants to. But the Kaiser win at Fort Hill in Cumberland, Maryland, that was, these two teams play on a yearly basis. I'm not sure that they've played every single year, but that was only the second time since 1938 that Kaiser had won in Cumberland against Fort Hill. That says something, okay?
Yeah, I think the Cubs have been to the World Series more often since then.
Yeah, right,
They were all in the 30s, but I digress.
No, I mean, it's that kind of thing. I think Kaiser is making a statement that it's one of those top 4 AA teams again, whereas last year, they lost in the first round on the road to Byrd. I think that's my most noteworthy game of last week.
Right, and Ryan, you want to get into a little bit of that Point Pleasant Wayne game you covered?
Yeah, I can do that. Point Pleasant up front won that game. I know they averaged 16 yards per rush in that game against a Wayne defense that's usually about as stout as you're going to find anywhere in Class AA.
Where have you gone, Mason Hodge?
Yeah. Cody Mitchell. I've seen Dylan Tonkery and I've seen Cody Mitchell. Now, if you looked at both of those games in a vacuum, Cody Mitchell might have had the better game. Now, I'm not saying he's a better player than Dylan Tonkery, and I'll get a chance to see him again Friday, which is exciting. But in that game, Cody Mitchell was leaving cleat marks in defenders' chests all the way down the field. It was very impressive. And, Point, we kind of talked a little bit about before we went on here, their schedule. How it would be great if they could have a few more marquee games in that schedule so we would know really what they have. I think in a couple weeks they're at Parkersburg South. That'll be real fun.
Yeah, circle that one. That's a good Parkersburg South team. That's one I'll get into. Parkersburg South, Morgantown. It goes to overtime. Morgantown gets the win last week. I've been kind of high on Parkersburg South so far, but I thought more than that, it was a nice benchmark for Morgantown because we've been kind of wishy-washy on, Is Morgantown going to be any good this year? Well, it looks like a win like that on the road in Parkersburg, that's a good win for the Mohegans. But we'll stop there in that segment. Move on. We'll get into the Gazette Mail prep football poll for Week 4. A lot of moving and shaking in Class AAA this week, and what I'll do is I'll just read through the top 10, the others receiving votes, and then we can kind of hit where we're going from there. Starting in Class AAA, the previously mentioned Cabell Midland Knights received 7 first-place votes. They are the number 1 team in the state this week. Number 2, Capital drops down after that loss to Cabell Midland, so that's kind of interesting there. Capital only fell 1 spot. Number 3, Wheeling Park received 2 first-place votes, up from number 4 last week. Number 4 this week is the previously mentioned Point Pleasant Big Blacks. They were number 5 last week. At number 5 this week, Huntington up 1 spot from number 6. Morgantown, number 6, up 1 spot from 7. And Jefferson, number 7, up 1 spot from number 8. The big faller in this week's poll in Class AAA, at least, South Charleston. Black Eagles, number 2 last week. That loss to Spring Valley drops them to 1-2 on the season and down to number 8. And a tie at number 9 between Hurricane and Parkersburg South. South stayed at number 9. Hurricane into the poll for the first time this season, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Others receiving votes in Class AAA, George Washington, Martinsburg, and Spring Valley. When's the last time I read a AAA top 10 anywhere, not just on the podcast, and Martinsburg wasn't one of the 10 names?
It had to be. Now, Dave Walker took over at Martinsburg in 1997, and they lost their first 3 games, and they had a losing season. That was the last time they were under 500 for a season. They've been in the playoffs every year since 1998. So as far as the poll goes, I would say it was probably 99 the last time that Martinsburg wasn't in the poll.
Legitimately, possibly the first time this century.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Just going back up, we'll get some quick thoughts. Obviously, I think Cabell Midland a deserving number 1. I tweeted as much Friday night after they beat Capital. I was a little surprised Wheeling Park didn't move up to number 2 there, but more so when I saw the poll, actually, and I saw that Wheeling Park was receiving first place votes. Capital, a lot of people had to have had Capital at number 2 for them to stay there. And, Hurricane down at number 9. We'll get into them a little more towards the end of the program, but they're 3-0. We had a story this week. Hurricane's coach says, they're the worst 3-0 team in the state. I mean, I don't want to pile on them. They're 3-0. They've been winning games, but they've beaten Winfield, Nitro, and Riverside. They're not exactly, going out and beating the world there. With Hurricane, you always kind of wonder, particularly early in the season, their schedule tends to break this way. They get some of the I don't want to say easier, but just the easier part of their schedule tends to be at the beginning. Is they've got a big game this week going up to Brook. Is this a Hurricane team that can go up to Brook and win? I'm not asking you to pick, but can they go up and win this game on the road?
Yeah. I would say yeah. Will they? I don't think that they're going to.
Okay.
I think Brook is on the rise a little bit again. Since the last time they played in the 2010 title game after that whole fiasco with Brawlgate, and they've dropped off since. I think Brook is slowly coming back, and this is a big trip for Hurricane. And Jeremy Taylor told me flat out that he's really concerned about this week. So I think we're going to see Hurricane really tested for the first time this week.
Any thoughts on the AAA poll this week?
Yeah, what's kind of just staying on the Hurricane thing, what's kind of interesting is Hurricane comes in here 3-0, ranked 9th. Brook's 1-2. You look at this on paper, you come to conclusions, but Brook was really tight with Huntington in game 1. They played Morgantown really tough too. They lost by 13 points, and that was kind of a late score, I believe.
Yeah, it was.
So, I think this is a huge game, not only for Hurricane, but for Brook, who still has, Parkersburg South, Steubenville, John Marshall, Wheeling Park left on their schedule with 2 losses. This is must-win territory for Brook, I think. So,
and what's GW got to do to get in the top 10? I know they've got a loss on the record, but I would have, at 87-8, I thought that might have impressed the voters a little more, but I'm not one of them, so. In Class AA this week, no change at the top. Bridgeport, number 1, receiving all 10 votes. Number 2, Bluefield. Number 3, Fairmont Senior. Number 4, Kaiser. Number 5, Tulsa. And number 6, Nicholas County. All chalk from last week. No changes there. The change in AA came at number 7. Chapmanville moved up from number 8. And Mingo Central remained number 7, tied with Chapmanville this week. At number 9, Robert C. Byrd. Got that Bridgeport game coming up. Ryan Pritt's going to go cover it on Friday. We'll get into that here in just a minute. And at number 10, Lincoln. Little Shinston in the Class AA poll this week. It's Cougars. They're hosting East Fairmont. Others receiving votes in Class AA, James Monroe, Wayne, and Westside. Little surprised Wayne still got a vote. But, Ryan, we'll talk with you about that Bridgeport Bird game right now. It seems like a good opportunity. You've got two ranked teams, county rivals. I mean, you've got the whole history of Bruce Carey having coached both teams. I mean, Clarksburg and Bridgeport are about as it's a rivalry. I'm grasping at words here. You'd think I worked with words professionally or something like that, but that's a big game if it's the kids from the elementary schools getting together to play hopscotch or something. Football, they just eat it, live it, breathe it up there. So big one going down in Harrison County. You're going to be up there.
Yeah, great lead into that, because I literally got off the phone with Coach Josh Nice-Warner from Bridgeport 10 minutes before we got here. And I asked him flat out, I said, is this a rivalry game? And his exact quote was, there's nothing better than beating them. So to me, that pretty much tells you all you need to know. Really excited kind of to see Robert C. Byrd again. You know, the first half of the Fairmont Senior game I was at to open the year was not a good half of football for Robert C. Byrd.
Yeah, and you've seen both of these teams already. So
the second half, RCB was much more competitive, and then, of course, they went on to win 2 games in pretty convincing fashion since then. So to see how far they've come in 3 games, I'm really excited to see that too.
Derek, any thoughts on AA?
Yeah, 70% of the top 10 teams in the state come from either the Big Ten or the Cardinal Conference. Now they have an annual basketball showdown thing at the they do it at West Virginia State now, but they have done it at the Civic Center. These are the 2 premier AA conferences, and I think this week's poll shows that, with Lincoln joining Byrd, Bridgeport, you know, from the Big, and Fairmont Senior from the Big Ten, and the Cardinal having Tulsa, Chapmanville, and Mingo Central in there,
and Wayne receiving
and
votes.
Wayne's still receiving votes. Yeah. So I mean, that's where your power is centered in AA.
Yeah.
Most definitely.
One other real quick thing, you kind of mentioned Kaiser, and they kind of have a tendency to disappear a little bit.
Yeah.
Up there playing Maryland teams. Well, Bluefield's kind of the same way to me. Remember last year, I believe they entered the Class AA playoffs as a 3 seed.
Yeah, 2 or 3.
Were upset by Ravenswood in the first round.
Yep.
Really kind of excited to see what exactly Bluefield has here.
So in Class A, we'll wrap this up here with the final top 10 of the week. In Class A, similar to Class AA, Magnolia remains at number 1, receives all 10 votes, 100 points. They will host River Local, Ohio. Number 2, Moorfield. Number 3, Williamstown. Those remain the same from last week. Wheeling Central also not moving at all. Maroon Knights number 4 in the Gazette Mail football poll this week. Number 5, St. Mary's up 1 spot from number 6. At number 6, Hillbillies up 1 spot from number 7. Even though they still number 1 nickname in my heart right here, though. At number 7, Tug Valley drops down to from number 5 last week. That's Tug Valley at 7, down from 5. Number 8, Buffalo. 3-0 Bison remain at number 8 this week. What's the Bison got to do to get a little love in the poll?
Have somebody else lose.
Yeah, it looks like. They're hosting Greenbrier West this week. That's Southern West Virginia Class A teams. It's just long trips, and we're seeing more and more of that Buffalo Greenbrier West type games, and I think that's just going to how it's going to be from now on in Class A, particularly in this part of the state. Anyway, we were at number 9 in Class A. It's East Hardy. They remain at number 9 this week. And a tie at number 10, 2 newcomers to the poll this week, Bishop Donahue and South Harrison. South Harrison, wow. You don't hear that name in football a whole lot. But
they haven't been there in a while.
Hawks are 3-0, and that seems like a pretty good place to jump in. Not a lot of movement at the top of Class A.
Right.
We've talked about in previous weeks how this might be one of those years where the traditional powers just name 5 or 6 of them in Class A, and that's probably going to be the top 5 or 6, maybe even 7 of the poll. But teams like South Harrison, it's good to see them sneak into polls like this, because just me talking, I think of South Harrison, I think, okay, that's kind of a baseball school, you get some track, but football's not really on my radar with them. So good to see the Hawks in the poll.
Certainly, yeah. When I worked in Clarksburg in the mid 2000s, South Harrison had a couple really good football teams. One of them was, I think, a number 5 seed, and they played St. Mary's and lost in the quarterfinals, and St. Mary's was a 4 seed at that point. And then they've gone through this lull for the past 7 or 8 years. What happened was South Harrison left the Mason-Dixon Conference and joined the Little Kanawha Conference, and their schedule got exponentially more difficult. And now, though, it seems, at least with this group, they're better able to handle that, and they're being more competitive.
Mr. Pritt, any thoughts on Class A?
St. Mary's at number 5, undefeated again. Kind of talked to Coach Jody Moat before the season, and he said this team might be able to surprise some people. I know they lost, I think, 7 starters on offense,
a bunch.
5, 6, 7 on defense. It's still early, the jury's still out, but to see them hanging around 3-0 again after that disappointing loss in the Class A title game, I think that's worth a shout out there too.
And that's where we'll end our segment with the Gazette Mail poll. Moving right along, let's take a look at some of the players that have caught our attention through the season's first 3 weeks. We won't get into awards, and this is kind of a flexible part of the show. We do it a little different every week, but just maybe some guys that you're looking at as potential All-State guys. We'll put it that way. Not necessarily, this guy's going to win the Kennedy, this guy's going to win the Moss Award, this guy's going to win the Huff. Right. But, Derek, we'll start with you. Just who are some of the guys that have caught your eye that maybe aren't those marquee names we mentioned in past weeks for Kennedy Awards type things?
The first name that comes to my mind is Chapmanville quarterback Alex Berry, who's been starting for at least 3 years. He's got 10 touchdown passes already. He's averaging more than 250 yards passing a game. The Tigers are 3-0 after missing the playoffs last year, so they've kind of fallen off the radar. And now with them undefeated through 3 weeks, of course, that Cardinal Conference thing that I just spoke about, I haven't seen them yet, but the numbers Alex Berry is putting up are making me want to go see Chapmanville. So that's right off the top of my head. The other one is Tyler May, the other quarterback at Roane County, who they don't throw as much, but he ran for more than 450 yards last week in a big win against Ravenswood.
Like 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, who's admittedly struggling, but nevertheless, that's a lot of rushing yards for a quarterback in one game.
Ryan, how about you? Anybody that we haven't mentioned?
Somebody that kind of flies a little bit under the radar because he's outshadowed by his own teammate. Point Pleasant's Grant Safford, putting up big numbers rushing the ball, first of all. But second of all, in defense, a fumble return for a touchdown against Wayne. Plays a really good linebacker spot. I think he's a really solid player and one to watch moving forward.
Cool. We would be remiss if I didn't throw out our WVHuddle.com player of the week, sophomore quarterback from Winfield, Andrew Huff. Big week, 5 touchdowns, 200 yards in their first win of the season. I know they were playing Ripley, and the Vikings have just been crushed by injuries so far, but Huff's a kid we talked about. I don't remember if we talked about it on the first episode, but we talked in the preseason about, if Winfield's going to do anything, it's probably going to be on this kid's shoulder. Those 5 touchdowns, they win a game. He's just a sophomore. Obviously, there's some time there, but things are looking good for Winfield at that position.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, he's got a couple more years to develop, but I like the way he looked in the preseason. I went out there and watched him practice some. I think he's a guy on the rise too.
Anything to add there, Brian? Anybody else?
That sums it up for me.
All right. Well, that almost wraps things up for us here at Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill in downtown Charleston. But before we go, let's get a bit of a parting shot from everybody, and I'll go first. We've talked about Tulsa's kind of rise this season in past episodes, but a team we haven't really talked a whole lot about is Herbert Hoover. The Huskies, it seems like this might be a year they could be a team that gets in the playoffs. A big game in the Cardinal Conference with Tulsa and Hoover this weekend. It's going to be, is can Tulsa keep it going? I don't want to say is Tulsa for real because they've beaten Mango Central, they've beaten Wayne. We know Tulsa's for real, but now that those expectations are there, people are watching them. Can they do it? Put the spotlight on. And kind of the flip side of that with Hoover, you look at this beginning of the season, you might have circled that Tulsa game like, oh, that's a win for Hoover, and it's absolutely not now. And are they going to be able to rise to the occasion? Because this is not the Tulsa team I imagine they were expecting coming in. All right, Derek, we'll get your parting shot now.
Yeah, I spoke early in the year, frequently actually, about this year being kind of a thin year for quarterbacks in the state. Beyond Tyree Pratt at Capital and Kentre Greer at South Charleston, that there wasn't a whole lot throughout the state. But I think I might have just been looking in the wrong area, because I'm looking at the AA quarterbacks, and there's 5 of them. I mentioned 2 of them in the previous segment with Alex Berry at Chapmanville and Tyler May at Roane County. But we've also got Julian Marino at Robert C. Byrd. We've got Stevie Hammond down at Mingo Central, and we got Dominic Smith at Fairmont Senior. That's 5 in short order that we could come up with that are all-state caliber, playoff quality quarterbacks. And I think the depth at quarterback this year isn't that it's not there, it's just that I was looking in the wrong place. It looks like it's in AA this year.
Real quick, Bluefield, we talked about them 3-0. They tend to have pretty good quarterbacks. Is that another one? It just seems like you're starting to listing off AA quarterbacks. A 3-0 Bluefield team probably's got a quarterback involved somewhere there.
It probably does.
Yeah, and I haven't looked at their roster to know this year.
I haven't either before today.
Yeah, well, so much for that. Sorry, Bluefield. We'll get you next week. All right, Ryan.
Behind the camera.
Yeah.
There's a Bluefield back there.
No. All right. Ryan, your parting shot.
Okay. A game that kind of snuck under the radar because it was played on Saturday. Magnolia pasted Greenbrier West on Saturday and held them to minus rushing yards, I believe, in that game. Now, this is not the Greenbrier West team that has been around the last couple of seasons, admittedly.
Right.
But we kind of mentioned Cody Mitchell at point and his return from an injury and how that's helped. Kyle Ritz at Magnolia is about as good of a tight end as I've seen ever in high school football.
Gotcha.
I think, last year going 4-6 with those really tight losses that they had, they could have, if they would have gotten the playoffs, who knows what they could have done. But this year, it really seems like they're out for blood. So watch out for Magnolia the rest of the year.
Well, guys, I think that just about does it for our first episode of the podcast, hosted at Adelphia Sports Bar and Grill downtown, 218 Capitol Street, the heart of downtown Charleston. Yeah, the kitchen.
Great view.
Oh, it's great. We got a. You guys can't see it, but we can see window. We have a window behind us. People going by. There's been a bunch of Charleston Catholic students going by. It's a prep football podcast.
Right on.
Prep football
Yeah.
there. Anyway, you can come on down to Adelphia, 218 Capitol Street, heart of downtown Charleston. Kitchen stays open late. They got great food late night.
Definitely.
College football, NFL on TV every night. Happy hours from 4:30 to 7:30. So come on down to Adelphia. I think we all had wings beforehand. You had a gyro.
Gyro, yeah.
Oh,
that thing was delicious.
It's so
man.
good. I could go on about we could do a podcast about the Adelphia food if they would want us to. Do they want us to? Maybe.
I'm down.
Anything else you guys want to add before we sign off here? Oh, I gotta plug all our stuff. We're at wvhuddle.com for all our prep football and high school football action on the social medias at wvhuddle. That's on Twitter, at Instagram, all that stuff. Derek is on Twitter at It's Really DT. Ryan is at rprit, and I am at Tom Bragg Sports. Guys, thanks again for watching the wvhuddle.com prep football podcast. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Yeah.